I don't know if I mentioned this before, but last June I had shoulder surgery. It was one of those things where I had a rotator cuff repair, labrum repair, bicep tenodesis. They detach the bicep tendon and reattach it somewhere else. And the thing is, going into it, I knew that it was time. I've been going to physical therapy for years, and my PT was like, we're putting a Band-Aid on this at this point. So I knew it was time. And also I knew that it would take time. They told me so many times. I mean, every medical person I talked to said, yeah, no, it's like 9 months to a year of recovery. It's just, you can't rush it. So I knew I needed to take it slow. And I knew it was going to be painful. So many people have gone through surgeries said out of all the surgeries they've been through, the shoulder surgery was the most painful, it was most difficult. So all of those things, I knew all of it. I also knew this. I knew that the reason why I was getting the surgery was so that I could go back to the gym, so I could go back to kind of that fully functional human being. The thing is, I knew all of that. But 10 weeks after the surgery, I'm out of the sling for a couple weeks at this point, and still so limited in what I could do and still so painful. And my physical therapist was like, hey, just come back to the gym. My friends were like, hey, come back to the gym. Just go back to the gym. And I remember talking to a really good friend of mine one Sunday, and I remember telling her, I said, I don't think I'll ever go back. Because I was just so, it might seem silly right now, but I just was like, I don't know. I just am so defeated. Again, I knew all these things, but I just was so discouraged. That night I went to sleep and I woke up at 2 a.m. I don't know if you ever have those moments where you wake up and I could not get back to sleep. And so at one point it became 4 o'clock in the morning, and that's when I would normally get up to go to the gym. So I was like, well, shoot, I guess I'm awake. I might as well get up and get in my car and go to the gym. So that's what I did. I got up and got in my car, drove to the gym, and I walked in, and some of the regulars were like, hey, you're back, kind of thing. And I walked in, I went to where I would normally go, and I put my bag down. I was like, is Bryn, my physical therapist, is she coming in today? They're like, oh yeah, she hasn't been in on Mondays in a long time. And that moment, I'm like, I'm done. So I picked up my bag. I was like, you guys, I think I'm taking off. And they're like, really? Are you serious? I'm like, yeah. Again, maybe I'm dramatic, but I actually started walking to the door, and the coach came around the corner and was like, hey, he's back. And I was like, shoot, I can't leave now. It was one of those situations where, again, it might sound so silly if you're just listening. To look back on it, it feels silly, but the reality is I was just, defeated. I felt so discouraged. And here's the thing. I knew it was going to take time. I knew it's one step at a time. I knew it was going to be slow. I knew it would be hard. I knew it would be painful. I knew all of these things, and that wasn't enough. I knew it all, and I was still discouraged. Last week we started a new series, the beginning of Easter. And the series is called The Next, right? So it's that based off of the reality that all the people who came into the church on Easter, they had their first communion, they had their first confession, they had their first experience, their first steps as Catholics. And all of us, we got to have our latest steps, whether that be the latest confession, our latest communion. And yet the reality, of course, is that we know the truth about Easter, right? We know the truth of the resurrection. We know the truth about Jesus. And so we know it's not just about our first, it's not just about our latest, it's all, moving forward, it's all going to be about the next. And so we mentioned last weekend too, right? That when you know Jesus is God, but we've established a church, when he gave us himself in the sacraments, when you know this, the enemy's last weapon is to try to get you discouraged. This is what the enemy wants to do. This is what the enemy wants to do. He wants to steal your courage. The enemy wants to steal your heart. That's it. So we know this. The next, whatever the next is, that will require something. The next will require courage. Whatever your next is, it will require heart. Even if you know. Look at the gospel today. This is Luke chapter 24, right? It's the incredible story of the road to Emmaus. And what are the details? So you have 2 disciples. It is the day of the resurrection. This is Easter Sunday. And what are they doing? They are walking the 7 miles from Jerusalem to Emmaus. Now, quick, who are the disciples? Who are these 2 disciples? Well, they say Cleopas. So who's Cleopas? Cleopas is the husband of Mary's sister. Right? So at the foot of the cross is Mary, and then her sister, the wife of Cleopas, right? So this Cleopas guy, he's Jesus' uncle. He's the father of James and Simon and Jude, like the first bishops of Jerusalem. So he's not like just some random person. He and whoever the other person is, maybe Mrs. Cleopas, those two, they're disciples. They're potentially relatives. Cleopas is the uncle of Jesus. And what happens? Well, Jesus shows up, walks with them. They don't recognize him. And he asks the question, what are you talking about? Are you the only person who hasn't heard of Jesus the Nazarene? He's a prophet, mighty in deed and word, all these things. And even they recount this, they recount the story not only of how he was crucified, they recount the story of more than that. This morning, some women from our group have astounded us. Angels appeared to them and told us that he was not dead, but he was raised from the dead. Now, here's the thing. Let's wait on this. They were astounded because these women that they probably know very, very well, had seen angels that morning saying that Jesus wasn't dead, that he was alive, that he had conquered death. They had been told. They knew. And they were still leaving. How is that possible? If they knew, why are they walking 7 miles? If they knew, why are they leaving? And I think the text tells us. It says, Jesus stops them. They stopped looking downcast. They say, you're the only person who's never heard of Jesus the Nazarene. They don't say Jesus the Messiah. They just say where he's from, Nazareth. And even say this, they said, but we had hoped. They knew, but they had lost heart. You know what it is to be discouraged is to lose courage, right? Discourage is to lose courage. But the etymology of that word, even courage, comes from the Latin word cor, C-O-R, which means heart. So to become discouraged means to lose heart. So here, as we're in this series, the question is this: will love grow cold? Another question is, will I lose heart? Because the truth, of course, is this: the enemy has one last weapon. The enemy wants to steal your heart. Years ago, I read this book by John Eldredge. He's a Christian author. And in the book, he highlighted this reality. And in fact, of all things, he pointed to another book by L. Frank Baum, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. And I didn't know this until I read this book so many years ago. But for the first time, I read this origin story of the Tin Man, right? The Tin Woodsman. And I'm going to read a long quote this is actually from The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, the actual story, not anyone's, retconning of the story in the movie Wicked, no offense. But the actual true story, original account of the Tin Woodsman. So originally, the Tin Woodsman was a human being. And what had happened was he had fallen in love with a beautiful Munchkin girl. In fact, he says this. He says, there was one of the Munchkin girls, this is a quote from the book, who was so beautiful that I soon grew to love her with all my heart. And she, on her part, promised to marry me as soon as I could earn enough money to build a better house for her. So I set to work harder than ever. But what happened is she lived with this old woman who did not want to lose the Munchkin lady. And so she hired the Wicked Witch of the East to cast a spell on the woodsman's axe. So he says, thereupon, she enchanted my axe. When I was chopping away at my best one day, for I was anxious to get the new house done, the axe slipped. And all at once, I cut off my left leg. This at first seemed a great misfortune, for I knew that a one-legged man could not do very well as a wood chopper. So I went to the tinsmith, had him make me a new leg out of tin. The leg worked very well, indeed, so once I was used to it, but my action angered the Wicked Witch of the East, for she had promised the old woman that I should not marry the pretty Munchkin girl. When I began chopping again, the axe slipped and cut off my right leg. Again, I went to the tinsmith, and again, he made me a leg out of tin. After this, the enchanted axe cut off my arms, one after the other, but nothing daunted, I had been replaced with tin ones. The Wicked Witch then made the axe slip and cut off my head, and at first, I thought that was the end of me. But the tinsmith happened to come along, and he made me a new head out of tin. I thought that I had beaten the Wicked Witch then, for I worked harder than ever. But I little knew how cruel my enemy could be. She thought of a new way to kill my love for the beautiful Munchkin maiden, and she made my axe slip again, so that it cut right through my body, splitting me into two halves. Once more, the tinsmith came to my help and made me a body of tin, fastening my tin arms and legs and head to it by means of joints, so I could move around as better than ever. But alas, now I had no heart, so that I lost all my love for the Munchkin girl, and I did not care whether I married her or not. I suppose she's still living with the old woman, waiting for me to come after her. Talks about how his body shined so brightly he didn't care anymore. He could work, he never stopped until he got rusted out. And while he rested, he could think about this and reflect on this. He stood there, he said this, I stood there and had a long time to think that the greatest loss I had known was the loss of my heart. Well, I was in love. I was the happiest man on earth. But no one can love who has not a heart. So I'm resolved to ask Oz to give me one. If he does, I'll go back to the Munchkin maiden and marry her. And talks about how then the Scarecrow and Dorothy were fascinated by the story. The Scarecrow, of course, said, no, but I want a brain. And this is a great quote from the Scarecrow. Scarecrow says, all the same, I shall ask for brains instead of a heart, for a fool would not know what to do with a heart if he had one. Yet the Tin Woodsman said, but I shall take the heart, for brains do not make one happy, and happiness is the best thing in the world. There's an enemy. It's not the Wicked Witch of the East. There's an enemy, and that enemy wants to steal your heart. Because if he can steal your heart and get you and me to lose heart, then he can keep us away from the one who loves us with all of his heart. So here's the question, what do we do? What do we do when this happens? What do we do when the enemy gets us discouraged? What do we do when the enemy has stolen his heart? And the answer is this, we do the opposite of what the disciples do in the gospel today. The disciples in the gospel, they had lost heart, so what they do? They went away. They lost heart, so what did they do? They left. They knew where he was. They knew where Jesus was. He was somewhere in Jerusalem. But they left, and here's the great thing. Jesus, we heard it today, Jesus finds them and he does two things. Number one, he opens the scripture to them. When they hear the word of God, when they hear scriptures unpacked, what happens? Their hearts start burning. They say, weren't our hearts burning within us? Then they realize there's still hope. But that's not the end. They get to that moment where they invite him into their home. And at table, Jesus takes bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. And this is the key line in Luke chapter 24. Their hearts were on fire when they heard God's word. But they recognized him in the breaking of the bread. And in the New Testament, Luke's gospel and in the Acts of the Apostles, which Luke also wrote, that phrase, breaking of the bread, is code for the Eucharist. That breaking of the bread is code for the Mass. Now we say like, oh yeah, when we lose heart, we could say things like, oh, well, I would have stayed. What? Well, I would have stayed if I knew for sure. Or I would have stayed if things were different. I would have stayed if I wasn't so heartbroken. So what do? When the enemy tries to steal your heart, you go to where he is, Jesus is. When the enemy tries to steal your heart, you stay where Jesus is. And where do the disciples find Jesus? Where do they see Jesus? Where do they recognize Jesus? In the breaking of the bread, in the Mass, in the Eucharist. And this is so important for us. Because if we're wondering, like, how do I keep going? How do I move forward? How do I not lose heart? How does my love not grow cold? The answer is the Eucharist. Jesus said it so clearly, right in John 6. He said, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life within you. He said, my flesh is true food. My blood is true drink. He said, the bread that I will give is my flesh for the life of the world. And then, of course, in Luke's gospel, and in Matthew's gospel, and in Mark's gospel, at the Last Supper, what does Jesus say? He says, this is my body. This is my blood. Eat it, drink it, do this in memory of me. And this is the reality. We know this. We know that the Eucharist is not a symbol. The Eucharist, what we're doing here at the Mass, it's not a symbol. If the Eucharist is a symbol, then stay home. Like there's no reason to be here. In fact, even more dramatically than that, there's one of the greatest American authors. Her name is Flannery O'Connor. Flannery O'Connor was a Catholic living in the deep South in the United States. And so she was not surrounded by a lot of Catholics. She was surrounded by a lot of non-Catholics. At one point, apparently, there's a story about she was at this dinner. She didn't like dinners, but she went there, had to be sociable. Surrounded by all of these Protestants. But there was one Catholic at the table. And that one Catholic was talking about how that one Catholic believed that the Eucharist really isn't Jesus. It's just a symbol of Jesus. And finally, Flannery O'Connor, who in a public setting didn't really like to pipe up, she piped up, and she piped up in a significant way, where this person was saying, it's just a symbol. And Flannery O'Connor responded, if it's a symbol, then to hell with it. Because if it's a symbol, just stay home. But if it's Jesus, then nothing matters more. Mother Teresa said it like this. She said, when you look at the crucifix, you can see how much Jesus loved you back then. Just look at a crucifix. That's how much Jesus loved you back then. She said, but when you look at the Eucharist, you can see how much Jesus loves you now. So go to where Jesus is and stay where he is. If the danger is that someone out there wants to steal your heart, wants to steal your courage, then go to where Jesus is and stay where he is. And that's why Sunday Mass is so vital for us. I mean, obviously, yes, there's some times where you're in the hospital, you're in a nursing home, you're taking care of someone, you can't make it to Mass. If there's a time you can't make it to Mass, call your priest and ask for a dispensation. You can do that. But sometimes people say things like, well, I just can't make it to Mass because it's inconvenient. I can't make it to Mass because I'm out of town. Listen, I've been out of town. They have Mass there too. In fact, here's the measurement. I don't know if you've heard me say this before, but we once had a young woman who worked here. She worked at Newman with us for a while. And she also was a rock climber. And she told me the story once about how she was on this massive rock climbing adventure in Thailand. And at one point she was on an island off of Thailand. And there was no Catholic church on the island. And so she was looking up the nearest Sunday Mass, and she said, well, shoot, I guess I can't make it to Mass, because she did the math, and she's basically, if I'm going to make it to Mass, I have to get up at 4 and take a ferry across the way to the mainland, and then I've got to take a 2-hour bus to get to Mass. So I can't make it to Mass. But then, in her moment of honesty, she said, wait, if this was like a climbing adventure where I had to get up at 4, take a ferry, and then take a 2-hour bus, I absolutely would make it. So she would say, so it's not that I can't make it to Mass. If I don't go, I'd be choosing to not go to Mass. I think that should be our litmus test for whether I can make it or not make it. Why? Because the enemy wants to steal your heart. He wants to steal my heart. If you don't want to lose heart, go to where he is and stay where he is. In fact, the invitation is this. Not just Sunday Mass. Here's my invitation for all of our students, for every person who's listening to this. Don't just go to Sunday Mass. My invitation is all throughout the course of this summer, go to at least one daily Mass. Extra, right? So Sunday Mass and then at least one daily Mass. I was looking for statistics on what it does for a person's life. Like what does maybe going to daily Mass do for a person's life? And the best I came across was there was a survey that said that 92% of people who attended church services, not specifically Catholic, but attended church services more than once a week, 92% of them said they were happy or pretty happy. And I was like, that's pretty good. Another stat said this. You realize only 1% of Catholics go to daily Mass. Out of the over 1 billion Catholics in the world, only 1% of Catholics go to daily Mass. Now start reflecting on that and then realize something else. Even if only 1% of Catholics go to daily Mass, do you realize that 100% of saints go to daily Mass? Out of all the saints who have ever lived in the last 2,000 years, if they could, 100% of them went to daily Mass. This is the last thing. Go to your next Mass to never lose heart. Why? Because the Eucharist really is Jesus. So go to where Jesus is and stay where he is. And of course, we go to Mass and I don't feel anything. Go to Mass and it doesn't seem like it's really Jesus. I receive the Eucharist and I know, in my faith, I know. But sometimes it doesn't feel like it. That's such a common experience for us. It's Jesus, but it's hidden. That there have been some times in history where Jesus has revealed himself in the Eucharist in a unique way. One of the biggest ones happened about 1,200 years ago in a town called Lanciano in Italy. There was a priest who was at Mass and he was struggling. He was struggling in faith. He actually possibly had lost heart, lost faith, lost courage, and he was questioning whether Jesus is truly present in the Eucharist. And in his hands and in the chalice, that bread and wine literally, physically became the body and blood of Christ. In fact, you can go to Lanciano, Italy right now and you can see it. You say, well, that's such an old miracle. Well, in the 1970s, they did a study on that Eucharist. There's another time in the 1990s, so not too long ago, in Buenos Aires, something similar happened. And they studied that Eucharist. They studied it in the 2000s. The interesting thing is this. When scientists independently and oftentimes not knowing where the sample had come from. They studied the Eucharist that had literally changed. They found that the Eucharist, the host, was real human tissue. They found that it was actually real human tissue from a man, that the blood actually was blood, it was human blood. The blood type is blood type AB, which is not only the rarest of all blood types, not only that, but also every Eucharistic miracle, all the blood types match. But lastly, AB is universal receiver, which I think there's a message in there. I think there's a message of Jesus saying, like, no, everyone come to me. He's the universal receiver. But that tissue wasn't just, when he said, this is my body, wasn't just any random part of his body. Those scientists who studied the miracle from 1,200 years ago and the scientists who studied the miracle from 40 years ago, they came to the same conclusion. That tissue was from the myocardium. That tissue was the heart. That when you and I go to Mass and we receive Jesus, we're receiving his heart. So that when you and I have become discouraged, when you and I have lost heart, what do? We go to where he is and we stay where he is. We go to the Eucharist and we stay near the Eucharist. And not just your first Mass and not just our latest Mass, but have courage. This whole summer, go to your next Mass and never lose heart.
I'll be all right. You don't have to stay. If you've already chosen, I won't stand in your way. I can feel it in your distance, in the way you barely speak, like your heart is somewhere else now, somewhere I can't reach. I was trying just to hold us while you slowly slipped away. Now I'm left with all the silence you didn't want to say. Maybe I just held on to something already gone. I'll be fine, you can leave. You don't owe me anything. If your heart has found a way out of what we used to be, I'll be fine, don't look back. I'll survive this empty space. Not tonight, maybe not soon, but I'll learn to be okay. We don't need to fake the feeling, I can see it in your eyes. There's no reason left for staying when the love already died. Through the quiet in your voice, I can hear your choice. I'll be fine, you can leave. You don't owe me anything. If your heart has found a way out of what we used to be, I'll be fine, don't look back. I'll survive this empty space. Not tonight, maybe not soon, but I'll learn to be okay. I don't need a reason why, I can see it in goodbye. And it breaks me, yeah, it does, but I won't ask you to stay. I'll be all right.